The Colorado River once carved empires and fed entire civilizations, but its 2,300-kilometer lifeline is now shrinking faster than experts imagined. Nearly 40 million people depend on a promise this river can no longer keep. If the system fails, cities and farms across the Southwest face a reckoning. How did abundance turn to crisis, and what's left to save? From the snowfields high in the Rockies, the Colorado River begins a journey that stretches 2,300 kilometers to the Gulf of California. Along this winding path, deep canyons and sprawling deserts have been shaped not just by water, but by the hands and traditions of people who have called this basin home for thousands of years. In 1922, state commissioners and federal officials gathered in Santa Fe to divide the Colorado River's bounty. Their agreement, the Colorado River Compact, promised 15 million acre-feet of water each year, split evenly between the upper and lower basins. This figure was not drawn from centuries of careful measurement, but from a handful of wet years that inflated expectations. Hydrologist Eugene LaRue's early reports cautioned against relying on these high flows, warning that the river's true average might be far lower. Yet the political and economic momentum of the West demanded optimism. Herbert Hoover, chairing the negotiations, pressed for certainty to spur settlement and investment. The compact's numbers became law, locking 7 states into a future built on overestimated abundance. With the ink barely dry, the era of concrete began. The Hoover Dam rose from Black Canyon in 1936, creating Lake Mead, the largest reservoir in the United States. 3 decades later, Glen Canyon Dam was completed upstream, forming Lake Powell. These engineering marvels turned the river into a managed machine, storing water for cities and farms, generating electricity, and promising flood control. The system worked, at least on paper. As water poured into these reservoirs, it seemed the West had finally tamed the Colorado. But every allocation, every acre irrigated, every city that grew on the promise of flowing water drew from a legal ledger written in years of rare plenty, not in the reality of drought and scarcity. By the turn of the 21st century, a new reality was taking shape along the Colorado River. Decades of careful measurement at Lee's Ferry, the official dividing line between the upper and lower basins, revealed a pattern no one could ignore. Since 2000, the river's annual flow has fallen by about 20%, a staggering loss for a system already stretched thin. This isn't just a dry spell. Satellite gravimetry from NASA's GRACE mission confirms that the entire basin is losing water, not just from the river itself, but from shrinking snowpack, depleted soils, and dropping groundwater reserves. The numbers tell a stark story. What once averaged nearly 15 million acre-feet a year now often struggles to reach 12 though. In some recent years, flows have dipped as low as 8.5 million acre-feet. Scientists have searched for answers in both the sky and the soil. While drought cycles have always shaped the West, the fingerprints of human-driven climate change are now unmistakable. Brad Udall, a leading climate scientist, puts it plainly. The river's 20% decline this century is due, at least as much, to warming as to precipitation deficits. Higher temperatures mean more evaporation from rivers, reservoirs, and even the land itself. Snow melts sooner and faster, robbing the river of its slow summer recharge. GRACE satellite data maps the loss in haunting detail, showing not just surface shrinkage, but a basin-wide deficit that deepens every year. The Colorado River is no longer just running low, it's running behind, year after year, unable to refill the promises written into law a century ago. Lake Mead and Lake Powell, once symbols of American ingenuity, now reveal the cost of overpromising. Their shorelines have retreated so far that white mineral scars, bathtub rings, stand out against the canyon walls, each ring recording a level the reservoirs may never reach again. In March 2023, Lake Powell dropped to 3,522 feet above sea level, just 32 feet above the threshold where hydroelectric turbines at Glen Canyon Dam would go silent. At Hoover Dam, Lake Mead's minimum power pool sits at 1,050 feet. If the water falls below that line, turbines stop spinning and the grid loses a crucial supply of electricity for the Southwest. The dead pool, the point where water can no longer pass through the dam by gravity, lurks even lower. 3,370 feet for Lake Powell, 895 feet for Lake Mead. Below these elevations, not only does georegeneration end, but water deliveries to millions downstream simply stop. Satellite time-lapses lay bare the speed of decline. Landsat imagery shows marinas left high and dry, boat ramps stretching hundreds of meters from the water's edge. The Bureau of Reclamation, responsible for managing these reservoirs, has begun drafting emergency protocols. One operations lead put it plainly: "We are preparing for conditions we hoped never to see." Contingency plans include rerouting remaining flows and exploring structural modifications to access water below current intakes. But these fixes are costly, slow, and uncertain. Each day, the reservoirs linger near these thresholds. The risk grows that a single dry year or a surge in demand could tip the system into failure. The threat is no longer theoretical. The infrastructure built to guarantee water and power for the West now stands on the edge of collapse, with no easy rescue in sight. Across the American Southwest, the Colorado River is the silent partner in every daily routine. In Phoenix, Las Vegas, and Los Angeles, millions turn on taps, flush toilets, and water gardens with supplies piped hundreds of miles from the desert. These cities would not exist in their current form without the river's lifeblood. But the demands don't stop at the city limits. In the irrigated valleys of Arizona and California, farmers rely on Colorado water to coax green fields from sand and stone. Nearly a third of the nation's winter vegetables, lettuce, broccoli, spinach, grow in these desert fields, feeding grocery stores from coast to coast. The math is stark. Almost 80% of the river's water goes to agriculture, yet every drop is counted and contested. For a Yuma farmer, the season's fate hinges on a water allotment that shrinks with every dry year. A single missed delivery can mean empty fields, lost wages, and hard choices for families who have worked this land for generations. In city high-rises and rural farmhouses alike, the river's crisis is not distant. It is measured in dinner plates, paychecks, and the simple act of turning on a faucet. Negotiations over the Colorado River's shrinking supply have become a contest of both history and survival. Tribes across the basin, holding rights to nearly a fifth of the river's water, remain at the center of this struggle. Their legal claims, hard-won through decades of litigation and federal settlements, are recognized on paper, but often blocked by political and infrastructural barriers. In 2021, the federal government declared the river's first official shortage, triggering steep cuts for Arizona and raising the stakes for everyone with a claim. At closed-door meetings, state officials, tribal leaders, and federal negotiators have argued over every acre-foot, sometimes walking out or slamming data on the table. Chairwoman Amelia Flores of the Colorado River Indian tribes put it simply, "We have been shut out of the table for nearly a century. Today, tribal water is central to both justice and the river's future. Yet, with drought deepening and the rules of the river up for renegotiation, no agreement has resolved how to share what little remains. The basin stands at an impasse, with equity and survival hanging in the balance. Since 2000, the Colorado River's flow has dropped by about 20%, a decline confirmed by satellite data and federal records. Historic documents show the 1922 compact overpromised water based on wet years, locking the region into demands the river can no longer meet. Today, nearly 40 million people and farms that grow a third of America's winter vegetables depend on a shrinking supply. The first ever federal shortage declaration in 2021 marked the system's critical state. But key questions remain. How will states, tribes, and Mexico share further cuts? And can new technologies offset permanent losses from warming? What's clear from the record is that the decisions made a century ago still shape a crisis visible in every exposed shoreline and empty canal. As negotiations continue, the evidence points to a stark choice: either remake the system for a drier future, or watch the Colorado River's promise slip away.